Welcome back to 30 Minutes of Wisdom, Arising in Consciousness and Mindfulness. Today's session is going to be about taking back your mind, how to build mental resilience so you can focus more and get distracted less by the many notifications that are constantly clamoring for our attention. We are so fortunate today to be joined by Mark Guay. Mark is a soul-centric executive coach living in San Diego, California with his wife and son. Mark believes in the untethered ability to align personal values and professional goals. And this natural skill is often stripped away through the layers of corporate red tape that we're very familiar with, capital T, truth, that change is hard. Mark serves courageous professionals and has such a depth of wisdom that I can't wait to dive into. Welcome, Mark.
Such an honor to be here, Oren. Thank you so much for having me. Like I shared before going live here, I have such a giddiness in me because I've known you for so long and we haven't seen each other in person for so long. So we'll have to connect in person after this and go and play. I want to go on an adventure with you.
Yes. And we get I think that makes this conversation that much more just interesting and different, I think, from many of the live streams that we may tune into where, now connecting in this space around something that I know is so dear to both of us in this conversation around mindfulness and bringing this into our day-to-day lives in a really tangible way, in a really practical way, in a way that addresses the challenges that we experience moving through this modern world with so much technology that is so beneficial and can make our lives easier and more productive, and also be incredibly challenging to integrate in a really intentional way into our lives, such that we can still be as present and as connected to life in the way we intend to. So we'd love to just start there and hear some of your thoughts around this moment we're in, this time that we're in, and what makes this conversation about taking back your mind, about bringing this intentionality to our day-to-day practices so important.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great way to start. Great place to start. So it was a few years ago when I was offered my first big budget to take over marketing for a global company. And I really got to go behind the scenes for what social media marketing really looks like on the back end. Being a marketer, being all the information, private information that we get access to. And what I learned in that time was just how easy it is, first of all, to find the psychometrics to really essentially take advantage of someone so you can sell to them. But I also really just discovered how many things are vying for our attention right now. And I think that's the economy that we're really, and this is not my thought, this is other people are saying this as well, but our most valuable asset now is not our time and it's not our money, it's our attention. And what brings us here today is, my wife gave birth to our first child, our son, Rowan, about 10 and a half months ago. And I'll talk more about this in particular in relation to taking back your mind, but I'm just more aware than ever at just how many things are vying for our attention on a day-to-day basis, especially when you work from home, especially when you're not a Luddite, and especially when you're not off the grid. There's so many things, whether it's, billboards literally on the highway, social media, and then notifications, and then your phones. And there's just so many different ways to say, hey, here, come here. That our attention is a skill now. It's a literacy. It's a muscle that we have to work on. And if we don't consciously actually work on it, our attention will be taken away from us. And this is not something that I don't think our generation really had to deal with as much. I think we're on the same age. We're the generation that was born analog, raised digital. And so I saw, us go from my first girlfriend or whatever, waiting for that phone call, or, standing by the phone, waiting for the phone, get off the phone, I'm waiting for someone to call me. Right. And now it's just so easy to get a hold of someone, that kids growing up today really need to learn this mindfulness skill of focus, which is harder than ever to attain.
Yeah. Yeah. This always on nature of being connected all the time, reachable all the time, which one of those prime examples of so many benefits there. And also what it means, so many implications in terms of our attention. And to what you described, I've heard this framed as the attention economy, going back to this idea that this is really what these organizations, these products are vying for, is our attention. And they do so in such a way that if we are not in a practice of intentionally guiding our attention, building some of that muscle of how to be intentional with our attention, it's going to be pulled. It's just the nature, to your point, of just being a person in the world today. Our attention is going to be pulled. Yeah. So I'm curious if you could just share a little bit more about that, because I know it's not something that, it's one of those fish in water things when we're so used to things being the way that that they are. Sometimes it's easy to forget that this wasn't always the case.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah. There's so much to share on that. I laughed earlier because I just thought about, and I think a lot of people listening will resonate with this, but now that we can so easily communicate with each other, I love seeing like our parents' generation expect a response within a day. If they send a text and if you don't get back to them within a day, is everything okay? It's like, whoa, wait a second. When you were a kid, it would take, at least a couple days to get back to each other. And we've just tightened everything so much. But to go back to the premise of the question, what occurred for me was just how easy on an animalistic level it is to take our attention. And I remember holding my son and just being so aware at how, no matter how hard my wife or I would try to get his attention, the one thing that would get his attention more than anything else would be the notification of a screen. And as soon as that screen was on, that's where his attention went. And I'm not getting into the conversation about whether, as a parent, you should have your kids in front of screens. That's not the conversation that we're having here. But we're having the conversation of, what about us as animals? Because we forget, right? As humans, we, especially in the spiritual communities, we like to transcend the human form, but we're humans nonetheless. We have emotions, we have sensations, and our nervous system is so powerful, right? And so I just noticed how easily my son got distracted by the notification of a screen. And all of a sudden it hit me. I went, well, wait a second. Am I really that much different? In the world you and I live in, Oren, I often, work with my clients about going back to the inner child inside of us. And we've learned this loving self-talk of working with the wounded parts of ourselves from younger versions of ourselves. And I just started thinking, well, wait a second. I know I am a highly educated man. I know I'm older, but how much different am I really from my son here? What parts of me are actually the same age as him in terms of, our human anatomy? And it hit me, Pavlov's dog. And I remember learning about Pavlov's dog early on in my first career in education. And this theme of Pavlov's dog has stuck with me my entire life, because as a teacher, my first career was as a teacher in New York State. I remember the bell system and just always thinking to myself, how do these bells, what do they do to the students? What this whole type of bell system, what is it actually doing on a behavioral level? But then all of a sudden it hit me, what are our phones doing to us? Because it wasn't shortly after that I started to realize that no matter what I was doing, when my phone vibrated, I'm pointing to my phone here, when my phone would vibrate, no matter what I was doing, I was paying attention to that. I was distracted, even if it was only for what seemed like a blip of a second. And all of a sudden I started to become more aware of this. When I would be on calls with people, I would see, or even when I was watching a news interview and a journalist was interviewing someone, I would see that we would hear the phone vibrate, or we would hear the ding of an email notification on their screen because COVID took everything online. And I would see there would be like a 1 to 3 second pause. And oftentimes it would be, okay, so where was I talking about? What was I getting at? And they weren't even aware of it. And so I just started to look into that even more. And so let me tell you, let's talk about Pavlov's dog just for a second.
Yeah.
And, I'm not a trained psychologist, but my understanding of Pavlov was that he was studying essentially dogs, and he wanted to know if you put food in front of them, would the dog's glands naturally salivate? And what he found that shocked him was that initially what he noticed was that even the sounds of his footsteps coming towards the dogs would activate the salivation. And so he started to piece it together, and eventually they brought in a bell. And the sound of a bell, they came to discover, was enough. If they did bell, food in front of the dog would equate the sound of a bell with food in front of them. And the dog's glands would salivate naturally without the intention to salivate. They would just unconsciously do that, involuntarily do that. And eventually he and his team would just bring in the sound of a bell, and that alone would create salivation in the dogs. And so this whole question of, okay, interesting, there's no food at all, there's the sound of a bell, but the dog's body is naturally responding to what it perceives will eventually be food. Now, these are dogs. I don't know exactly what they're thinking, right? But if we bring this to the human animal and we go, well, how is this working on the human animal? To me, it's a complete correlation, because when we were younger, the notification was far less. In fact, I remember pagers. I was the cool kid with Jinkos and a chain and rollerblading, and I had my pager. It was so cool. and that was like the first thing of the vibration. Right. And then eventually the cell phone came. But now with social media, we have yet again something else that vibrates our phone. And even if we turn all of our vibrations or all those off, we often still get the vibration from a phone ring. So the point is that we have been inundated with the ding sound or the zzz of a vibration on many different levels. And what did it often lead to? It led to a core need getting filled, right? And this is how companies are spending billions of dollars to tap into this, because when you gamify something, when you get someone to feel connected, when you get someone to feel like, hey, there's a tasty treat over there, whether it's a notification that someone's liked your post, therefore you're tapping into the need of community, people like you, approval, right? These are core needs. You want more of it. And so every time there's a vibration, there's the thesis that I'm arguing here, and I'm not alone in this, is that every time that there's a vibration, every time there's a ding, unconsciously, there's a part of us that says there's a tasty treat over there. And what that does is it teaches us to avert stress. And when it comes to doing important work or having deep and committed relationships, there's a stress involved. And so going one step deeper, what I believe occurs and what I've seen occur is that we have trained our brains, our minds, to every time that we feel stress to seek some sort of tasty treat. And that's why, and I'm including myself in this group, all of a sudden I'll find myself, why am I scrolling through Instagram? Why am I even searching? Why am I looking at my email? I don't need to. Why am I looking at? And it's because I'm searching for that respite, because I've learned, my body has learned that that's where to go. That's a place to de-stress, even though it really doesn't. It actually creates more stress. We know that, but the body reacts in a different way. That's the salivation that we get.
Yeah. There's so much, there's so many directions we could go there. And I'm just appreciating.
It's heavy. Yeah. There's a lot to it.
Yeah. And especially given this time that we've all been experiencing collectively of greater disconnection when it comes to our social lives more generally, and how suddenly our potential sources of connection are narrowed to be squarely focused in many cases on these devices that provide that connection for us. And this analogy you gave, I think, is such an important one to. It's, we learn this idea of Pavlov's dogs in our college psychology course, but to your point, we can almost feel like we're human. We're aware of what we're doing, and we're aware of what guides our attention and our energy. And to me, there's more research demonstrating this when it comes to our attention and the impact of technology. When we approach this with a bit more humility and recognize that we are in constant relationship with our environment. And when we are being rewarded at a neurochemical level by interacting and relating with certain technologies and communication platforms, it can be an entirely unconscious process of, to this last point you made, turning to that neurochemical cocktail, that dopamine, to address and help alleviate some of the stress we're experiencing. And what that then creates, what a lot of us experience, is we never actually manage or move through whatever the stressor really is. We're just temporarily escaping from that experience in the present moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that, the effect of that, the result of that, are shallower relationships and shallower, more shallow work. And I believe that we are living in one of the most beautiful times, the new enlightenment, because of the way in which information is able to be spread. And there's so much that is coming out of this time that is amazing. And I think there could be so much more. And so, in mindfulness, that's something that we often talk about is one of the effects, one of the results of mindfulness is being able to deepen into all that you are, the presence with your work and what you offer to the world, because the world needs us. The world is begging for us to show up. And then also for our relationships as well. And like we talked about, there's a stressor in that. There's a natural stress to work through. I like the way you word that.
Yeah. So why don't we shift then now into more, because I know you've explored now, what's at our disposal to navigate this moment we find ourselves in. So we bring awareness to, and humility to, the fact that we are in this relationship with our environment. We are impacted by these devices that are such a core part of our lives and enable us to communicate in such a powerful way. Knowing that it is so easy to lose our capacity for presence or deep work and depth of connection that we actually are, what we really are craving and wanting to create with one another. What are some of those paths that you've seen and practiced that are supportive here?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And I want to be very clear and say that there's so many different ways to do that. And what I'm focusing on is one that, I feel an expert in, or I feel at least that this is where this is my wheelhouse. I've been playing in the mindfulness meditation space for many, many, many years. And so that's what I asked myself. Once I found out the problem, I said, okay, what can I do about it? I have this fancy microphone here. I have a history of teaching meditation. And I said, oh, well, let's see what I can do with that. And all of a sudden it clicked. And so what I've developed is a 3-day meditation journey called Take Back Your Mind. And I'll tell you exactly what the process is because it's not about knowing what it is, it's going through it. That's why I call it a journey and not so much a course. Mm-hmm. And it's not a one-time done type of thing. This is just the same thing as meditation, just the same thing as going to the gym. You continue to show up, and eventually the long-term results are just exponential. They're incredible. And so it's resetting. So day one is just becoming aware, literally on a somatic level, putting, the meditations intentionally put you in a state where your mind is more like clay. it's able to be molded. And so you get dropped into this, theta state where you're more adaptable, and you get introduced to the zzz sound of the notification, and you see just on a embodied somatic level the role that it plays. Because during the meditation, I'm asking you to focus just on basic meditation 101, focus on your thoughts and try to not be carried away by them. And so the leaves floating in a stream, I use that image. And once you introduce the zzz sound, it gets so much more difficult. Then after that, it's all about becoming consciously aware of what you can do with that. So instead of allowing the ding notification sound or the vibration sound to control you, you then take advantage of it, and you use it as an ability to help you focus more. And so it's rewiring. It's taking a look at what can we do then? Okay, every time that sound vibrates, what am I going to do before responding to it? If I even do respond to it, I'm going to take a deep breath, and I'm going to press my feet into the ground, and I'm going to imagine roots growing into the ground beneath me like a tree. And so you do that every single time that the phone vibrates. And eventually what happens is it becomes less of a way to distract and more for you to be present in the moment. Then on day 3, it's about re-engaging. So what is it in your life that is super important to you? Is it a relationship that you're working on? Is it a project that you're working on? Whatever it is, you focus on that. And through this visualization that I've created on day 3, you actually use that tool to help you focus more on whatever that is, whether it's a relationship or whether it's a project. So all you're doing is you're taking something that you are unconsciously, incompetent with. You were being controlled by the sound, and then you're becoming aware of it, and then you're turning it into a tool for you to actually to be more present in your life. And so this is why it's something that you continue to come to every time you notice your ability to get distracted has increased, or you have a new focus that you want to focus on. And the intention is you'll be able to, deepen that work that you want to bring to the world. And this is what I've seen so far. You'll be able to deepen into that relationship because you're becoming more and more aware of what is important to you, and your ability to discern in the present. Just your sort of discernment gets sharper, and it's really beautiful.
Yeah, thank you for laying out that process. And there is this beautiful simplicity and elegance to this process where really what I'm perceiving, and tell me if you perceive this another way, is we spoke about Pavlov's dogs. What we're doing is we're accepting that the bells are going to be there in different forms and shapes and versions. And so what is in our control as we seek to move from being at effect and stepping into where we are and where we can be at cause, we can shift through our practice, our relationship to the bell.
Yeah, exactly. The bells aren't going away. I'm not, as much as I sometimes have this idea of, I can go buy a cabin in the woods and I can do that for a little while. About a couple of times a year, I'm like, honey, there's a really nice house that's off the grid. I'm okay with that. The reality is for me is I'm in this world. I love this world. And I truly do think we're in the most beautiful time in history. So I want to be in it. And the bells aren't going away. No matter how much I try, there's always going to be something else that's trying to vie for my attention. So instead it's what do we actually do? How do we utilize that tool? How do we utilize that gift?
Yeah, that reframe. I'd love to bring it back to that first piece of this series and of this practice that you spoke to, because you mentioned the connection to the body. And as you know, this is an area of core interest and practice for me in my work. And what we can often breeze past because we associate our attention to our mind, with our mind. And this connection and what I'd prompt people to do, and what I actually did after Mark, when I first learned about this work and interest of yours, is I started paying more attention, like you're describing, to what was happening in my body when I got that vibration from the phone.
Yeah.
And I noticed actually very specifically where in my body there was some activation that happened that felt like for me, the same sensation as when I'm starting to get stressed in or feel that first impulse of stress in a challenging conversation. It felt a lot like that. And it was very subtle. But when I started to pay attention to it and notice the immediacy of that connection, once that was acknowledged, then that opened up a little bit more potential for choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so beautifully put. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. What I've heard from people as well is they're able to be very precise in the body where they feel that. Yeah. And there's a surprise on day 2 that I don't want to share here, because I feel like that would be like tweeting out a novel, which, destroys the beauty of the art. Mm-hmm. But there's something I do on day 2 that goes into that usually has a pretty powerful somatic release. You probably know what it is given your background. Mm-hmm. But it's take back your mind is what I'm calling it, because we call it mindfulness. We don't call it bodyfulness. We don't call it nervous system. We call it mindfulness because that is what we think. And the mind is not here. It's not just here. It's your sensorial experience and your relationship to that experience. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate you hitting on that, because this is, in my personal opinion, the aspect of this practice of mindful awareness and present moment awareness that can often be missed in the conversation, is that our mind is not just in our heads.
Right.
Our mind actually exists throughout the body in addition to our heads. And this is something this was a fairly radical idea when I started exploring it, but actually now there are very mainstream publications holding this truth in a way that is far beyond anything that I've seen in terms of this recognition around the nature of what it means to be aware and present and embodied.
Yeah, thank goodness. Because I live in a bubble here in San Diego, in SoCal, California. It's so different than New York, where I used to live. And I'm glad that it's reaching more of the mainstream, because it's changed my life. Yeah. Exponentially. And I'm so grateful for being introduced to this concept. And I have so much more to learn, to be clear, but just that simple, like you just put it, moving from, it's not just up here, it's actually down here, it's all around. Okay, what is it? Just, such an exhale.
Yeah. Yeah. So if folks are looking for where you're saying this is mainstream, I haven't heard about this. One recent publication to check out, the book, The Extended Mind by Annie Murphy Paul. She also had an article in the New York Times, an incredible researcher. And Mark, your offerings. So where can we find more about you and what you're up to?
Yeah, appreciate that. So takebackyourmind.com is where you'll be able to access the 3-day meditation journey. Takebackyourmind.com. And right now it's slated to launch November 1st. I decided to hire a sound engineer who's actually scoring the music and adding in all of the things that I always told myself I would do. I decided to invest fully into this one. And I'm really excited because he's doing amazing work, and he's from, Berkeley. And it's just, it really just gets me excited with what he's bringing to the meditation. So takebackyourmind.com. Would love to hear from you. If anyone out there decides to invest in that, please let me know how it's going. It's one thing creating the work, but I get so much fuel from hearing how it's directly helping people.
Yeah, beautiful. I cannot wait to check out that music and that experience. I'm really looking forward to it. Mark, my friend, thank you so much for joining us, sharing your perspective around this incredibly important topic for us all today. Appreciate you being here, and I'll see you very soon. And to everyone else out there, 30 Minutes of Wisdom, Rising in Consciousness and Mindfulness is here every week on Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. So we look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care, everyone.